So as we've discussed earlier, from the theoretical framework, then testable hypothesis can be developed to examine whether your theory is valid or not. Please remember that the hypothesized relationship can thereafter be tested through appropriate statistical analysis, and therefore the entire deductive research project rests on the basis of the theoretical framework. Even if testable hypotheses are not necessarily generated, like in some applied research projects, developing a good theoretical framework is the key to examining the problem that is under investigation. So, a theoretical framework involves the identification of network of relationship among the variables which are considered as the most important to the study of any given problem situation. And for that reason, it is really essential to understand what a variable means and what are the different types of variables. So, a variable is anything that can take on differing or varying values. So, the values can differ at various times from the same object or person, or at the same time for different objects or person. For example, variable can be production units, it can be absenteeism, and it can be motivation. Now, if we take absenteeism, I mean, for instance, like today, 3 members in the sales department may be absent. Tomorrow, 6 members may not show up for work. And the day after, there may be no one absent. So the value, therefore, theoretically range from 0 to all, being absent on the absenteeism variable. So we have 4 main types of variables: the dependent variable, as you can see, the independent variable, moderating variable, and mediating variable. Now, let's start off with the dependent variable. The dependent variable is the variable of primary interest to the researcher. The researcher's goal is to understand and describe the dependent variable, or to explain its variability, or you can also say to predict it. So in very simple words, it is the main variable that lends itself for investigation as a viable factor. And through the analysis of the dependent variable, that is finding what variables influence it, it is possible to find answers or solutions to the problems. And for this purpose, the researchers, we are generally interested in quantifying and measuring the dependent variable as well as other variables that influence this variable. So it is possible to have more than one dependent variable in a study. How? For example, there is always a struggle between quality and volume of output. So low cost production and customer satisfaction, and so on, right? So in such cases, the manager is entrusted to know the factors that influence all the dependent variables of interest, and how, some of them might differ in regard to different dependent variables. Independent variable, on the other hand, we say that it is generally assumed that an independent variable is the one that influences the dependent variable in either a positive or a negative way. Now, what it means is that when the independent variable is present, the dependent variable is also present, and with each unit of increase in the independent variable, there is an increase or decrease in the dependent variable. I mean, in other words, the variance in the dependent variable is accounted for by the independent variable. So to establish that a change in the independent variable causes a change in the dependent variable, there are 4 conditions that we need to make sure that they are met. The first one is that the independent and the dependent variable should co-vary. What it means is that a change in the dependent variable should be associated with the change in the independent variable. The second condition is that the independent variable, I mean the presumed causal factor, should precede the dependent variable. In other words, there must be a time sequence in which the two occur, and the cause must occur before the effect. The third condition is that no other factor should be a possible cause of change in the dependent variable. Hence, the researcher should control for the effects of other variables. The fourth condition is that a logical explanation, that is a theory, right? A theory is very important. So a logical explanation based on a sound theory is the key, and it must explain as why the independent variable affects the dependent variable. Now, this can be a little bit more clearer with the help of this following example, where you see that we have power distance as the dependent variable and managerial values as the independent variable. Now, based on the cross-cultural research, what it showcases is that managerial values govern the power distance between superiors and subordinates. So what we see here is that power distance, that is open interaction between the boss and the employee, versus the high power superior in limited interaction with the low power subordinate, is the subject of interest. And therefore, it becomes the dependent variable, whereas managerial values that explain the variance in power distance comprise the independent variable. The next variable is the moderating variable. The moderating variable is one that has a strong contingent effect on the independent-dependent variable relationship. That is, the presence of a third variable, which is the moderating variable, modifies the original relationship between the independent and the dependent variables. Now, this can be a little bit more clear with the help of an example. So let me share an example with you that can basically make you understand this entire moderating variable a bit more clearly. Now, let us take this example in which we see right here that we have organizational effectiveness as the dependent variable, workforce diversity as the independent variable, and we have managerial expertise which acts as the moderator. Now, let me explain. See, a predominant theory is that the diversity of the workforce, which comprises of people of different ethnic origins, race, and nationalities, it contributes more to organizational effectiveness, because each group, we believe, brings its own special expertise and skills to the workplace. So this synergy can be exploited, however, only if managers know how to harness the special talents of the diverse work group. Otherwise, they will remain untapped. So based on this particular scenario that we have, organizational effectiveness is the dependent variable, which is positively influenced by the workforce diversity, the independent variable. However, to harness the potential, managers must know how to encourage and coordinate the talents of the various groups to make things work. If not, what will happen is that the synergy will not be tapped. So in simple words, the effective utilization of different talents, perspectives, and varied problem-solving capabilities for enhanced organizational effectiveness is contingent on the skills of the manager in acting as a catalyst. So this managerial expertise then becomes the moderating variable. So moving on, the next variable is the mediating variable or the intervening variable. A mediating variable is one that surfaces between the time the independent variable starts operating to influence the dependent variable and the time their impact is felt on it. There is therefore a temporal quality or time dimension to the mediating variable. What it means is that bringing a mediating variable into play helps us to model a process. So the mediating variable, it surfaces as a function of the independent variable or variables operating in any situation, and it helps to conceptualize conceptualize and explain the influence of the independent variable on the dependent variable. It may sound a bit difficult, but let me share with you one example that can actually help you understand the mediating variable a little bit more clearly. Now, in the previous example, where the independent variable was workforce diversity, all right, it was influencing the dependent variable, which was organizational effectiveness. So the mediating variable that surfaces as a function of the diversity in the workforce is creative synergy. Now, this creative synergy results from a multi-ethnic, multiracial, and multinational, that is diverse workforce, interacting and bringing together their multifaceted expertise in problem solving. All right. So what it does is that it helps us to understand how organizational effectiveness can result from having diversity in the workforce. What we need to note over here is that creative synergy, the mediating variable, right? Mediating variable, it surfaces at time t2, right here, as a function of workforce diversity, which was in place at time t1 to bring about organizational effectiveness in time t3. So what we see is that the mediating variable of creative synergy, it helps us to conceptualize and understand how workforce diversity brings about organizational effectiveness.